All right, welcome. Welcome this half hour. My name is Tony from Wellness for Educators, Antonia Small. I go by Tony, and I have been doing a little series this fall on some fundamental sort of basic neuromuscular movements, starting with yield. We then went to push, then we went to reach, and this week's theme is, I'm sorry, I think I got that wrong. Push, reach, pull. Yeah, no, pull. We're on pull. And I suggested that if you had like small hand weights or even a Theraband, now I think you're mostly maybe on a break at school, but if you were to watch this later and you could just hit pause and go grab some tools. And even if you're in a classroom, I also grabbed some cans of soup from my pantry, like something like about a pound. It's just sometimes nice to have some sensory feedback, and having a little bit of load in our hands gives us a little bit more indication of what it is we're doing. So reaching, right? And then actively pulling. I will back up so that you can see that. But this idea of having a little bit of something in the hand. So as you're pulling, you can kind of feel some of the musculature in the arms contracting and drawing that arm down. And then really, honestly, like you could practice the pushing, right? So pushing and pulling are lovely complementary muscles and actions in the body, as is yielding and pushing, yielding and reaching. Like they sort of all work with each other. So next week, my plan is to combine all four into a full movement practice where we're going to sort of be with each of them and kind of feel the balance between the two. But this week's theme is pulling. So just to jump right into it, and you might want like a noontime stretch, I'm going to open up my space a little bit and point my camera to the wall. And so we can use this. If you don't have some other kind of tool, this becomes an opportunity, maybe in a classroom, on a break, to just go to a space and reach your arms up overhead. So I have my feet like 6 to 8 inches away. And I'm actually gonna now pull myself up the wall, let my arms climb, and I'm letting my heels leave the floor, and I'm rising up onto the balls of my feet. And so I'm reaching at the same time, I'm pulling myself up, and now I'm gonna pull my weight down by dropping my heels really slowly and letting the hands just guide me down the wall. And then once you're down, go ahead and let the shoulders come all the way down so they're sort of softening away from your ears. And then you can walk your fingers back up. So if you're just joining us, we're focusing on pulling this half-hour session. And I am now pulling myself up the wall, taking a beat up here, feeling both the reach and that pull. And then I'm going to lower my body weight down slowly, using my hands just to sort of act as a brake, and let my heels come down to the floor. And I'm going to rock back onto my heels, letting my shoulders and my arms float to sort of a natural soft height. And we're going to take it one more time. So walking the hands back up, rocking onto the soles of the feet. Or I'm sorry, the balls of the feet, heels rise. And then slowly letting the body weight come down, pulling the arms behind. And then also this last gesture of letting the shoulders drop away from the ears is a piece of the pulling gesture. So just feeling that sort of happen residually. And then you might let your elbows bend and float down the wall. And we can just take a moment. You could even turn and let your back come to the wall for a moment of just sort of soft yielding, right? We did this the very first time just stacking the bones, letting your body yield and feeling the residual sensations through your arms, through your shoulders, maybe in your armpits and the back, maybe your core got enlivened by that overhead reach. Just taking a moment. It can be really lovely to work with these 4 gestures, these 4 actions, and taking some time in between just to notice, like, what does the residual sensation feel like in my body? Does it help me to pause, to breathe, to feel before moving on? And then we can also begin to link them. So I just pushed myself off the wall. I'm going to come and grab cans of soup. I'm figuring they might be the closest thing to, like, if you had, I don't know, is there still Play-Doh in a classroom? It depends, I guess, on what age you're teaching. If there are cans of anything that might weigh about 1 pound, they could weigh 2 pounds. That's not a problem. And then we're going to just come to a chair because, well, that'll simplify things. So if whatever you've got in your hands that gives you a little bit of feedback, just something. It could be 2 stones, right? Nice warm rocks. I'm thinking out loud here, but I'm gonna guess you're being creative and can grab something from your environment to hold on to. And then we're gonna just practice reaching. So I'm thinking of reaching my hand up overhead, letting that lift, and I'm gonna pull it down, pulling it down. And what would it feel like? I'm gonna go back and forth as I'm speaking. What would it feel like if I imagined the load in my hand to have some resistance, more than the 15 fluid ounces or 13 fluid ounces I'm actually holding? What happens if you begin inviting your imagination to create just a little bit more resistance? So you're pulling something down from overhead, right? And you could conversely think about pushing, right? We can knit those 2 actions together straight away, pushing that load overhead and then pulling it down. What engages? We're going to take that one more time. So let's push this first side up, pushing up. Imagine it's heavier, pushing. And then you get to the top of that push, and now it's pulling, drawing that arm down, drawing the shoulder blade down, feeling the residual actions through the arm. Sometimes I talk about bony rhythms, like there's the bony rhythm of your scapula, your collarbone, your arm bones, your hand, and they have this lift and they're reaching up. And then when you go to pull, they have the shoulder blade comes down, the upper arm bone, the elbow bends, pulling the hand down and coming back to your thighs. And just taking a moment, again, noticing what is it like if you have weight in your hands, what does that weight feel like? What do the arms feel like? What does your center feel like? Is your breath rate the same as it was a few moments ago? Has it changed? What about your heartbeat? What about your body temperature? So then we might imagine, and we're going to do this first with just a light load, and then we can even work with a chair, figuring you're going to have a chair nearby. So if I push at the horizontal, right, and then pull back and in, and if I push the other side out and I pull back and in, just feeling into these muscles, bones, and there's this funny little rhythm between I'm pushing, I'm inviting a quality of push through one arm and a quality of pull through the other. And you might also play with the orientation of your knuckles, your hands. You could turn your cans vertical I had them horizontal first. And notice, does that change your awareness? Does that change the feeling sense of pulling with one arm, pushing with the other? And here we've really gotten into just moving back and forth. And you could, for the sake of argument, I'm going to come forward in my chair a little bit. And then what happens if I change the tempo? So I could get into a pushing, pulling, pushing, pulling. Maybe they both go pulling. If you're a rower, right, you can feel that sensation of tempo and pulling back against resistance, and also trying to create a kind of power through time. And just feeling into all the things. Feet are planted on the floor, center is strong, and you're pulling. I don't know, what does it feel like to pull in and punch out, and pull and punch and pull and punch and pull and punch? And then we're going to go ahead and just take a moment. Go ahead and let your weights come down, whatever you've got in your hands, letting the arms rest. Again, noticing sensation. You're welcome to close your eyes. Was the rowing action very familiar? Was it very novel to your muscles and tissues? Are you a rower? Have you never rowed? What are your associations with that gesture? Good. And now I'm going to change both the camera and our attention a little bit to pulling, which we can do without any need for a prop. Maybe you're in shoes, that's fine. I'm just taking my, I think my feet will slide a little better on the surface of my yoga mat. But thinking about extending one leg out, and then I'm going to pull that leg, pull the foot, sorry, back in. So I'm really pulling now with the back of my leg, extending that leg, pulling. So it's like I might have an object behind the heel that I'm trying to pull in towards me. I'm going to turn so it's very clear on the side. All right, so I'm sitting at the front of my chair pretty much and pulling that leg in. Another way to do this would be to extend the leg and pull down. Right, so extending that leg, activating the back of the legs, pulling that leg back and in, trying the other side. Start on the floor because we started there before. So heels on the floor, and you're thinking of pulling that heel towards the chair, bringing the foot flat, and then extending and pulling the leg in and extending and pulling. And maybe just noticing, I'm now going to switch to this lift off, right? Pulling the leg in from straight. Noticing that the rest of the body is in this state of sort of firm or stiff, enlivened tension, right? This is good quality tension, as opposed to sometimes we have a bit too much negative tension. And then go ahead and relax. You can let your knees waggle and then come back to quiet, maybe just letting your hands rest comfortably on your thighs, closing your eyes for a moment and feeling into the sensations created by the gesture up the back of the leg. And just taking a moment, noticing also there may be a change in heart rate or breath rhythm, but there may also just be a sensation of muscle tissue sort of pulsing a little bit. Just noticing whatever you perceive. Is it helpful to move right now? Can you breathe comfortably? Good. One more breath. Good. And now, I thought we might be daring and come out of the chair, facing your chair. So if you're on wheels, right, if your chair is on wheels, you're going to want to lock them up. And we're going to combine a little bit of pushing and pulling. So if it's comfortable for you to let there be a bit of body weight in your hands on your chair, that's great. I'm going to show you an alternative. If like having this much load in your arms or shoulders doesn't feel so great, I would then come to a wall. I don't know why I'm having a hard time with the height of my camera today. I'm sorry. I'm just going to move it. And you're going to have a bigger picture, but hopefully you'll still be able to see me. So if you're not comfortable putting weight in your hands on the chair because it's too much of an incline, then having hands at the wall might give you an opportunity, right? So here we've got push. I'm going to demonstrate both and talk a little bit about the pushing and the pulling here. So we're in plank essentially, right? We're supporting some of our body weight in our hands. If you wanted to increase that load here, you could come up on your tippy toes. And then really, when you come towards the wall or you come towards the floor or your chair, there's actually a pulling quality and then a pushing quality. So depending on how this feels, if you think of pulling yourself towards the wall and then pushing yourself away from the wall, pulling towards, pushing back. Right? So controlling that may be challenging on the chair, but it might be, that's where you want to try it. So same thing, I'm going to think of pulling myself towards the floor, towards the chair, what this does also, and then pushing myself away. What it also does is it creates a kind of mindfulness to the muscles. I'm breaking gravitational pull. Right? So when I'm pushing, it's pretty obvious I'm resisting gravity. But when I'm coming towards, I want to think about resisting gravity. So by pulling myself towards the chair, I'm sort of clicking on that neuromuscular pulling forward. Does that make sense? I hope so. Yeah, so you can kind of begin to see how pushing and pulling are very closely connected. I'm trying to think if I wanted to say one more thing. Pulling, pushing. Yeah, that's it. Okay, if you're feeling game, I'd love to invite you to the floor because it just becomes a little bit more apparent there. And then we'll take a little rest because there's lots going on in pushing and pulling. So if you have a place where you can just come down on a carpeted floor, that would be great. And we're going to take a yoga pose called child's pose, which is a nice place just to push back. So I'm hinging at my knees, providing that's skillful for you. If you needed to, you could open your knees. And you could also not fold as deeply, right? So if it were troublesome for you to fold back, you might leave your hips in the air and just let there be a little bit less of a hinge to the knees. So that's going to be for you to decide. I'm going to come back to this position, and sometimes, often, child's pose gets taught as a very passive moment, a very restorative practice. You might see it where you have your head on the floor, your forehead on the floor, your arms are relaxed. This is a really nice way to yield. I'm going to invite you to create more of an active child's pose with a push. So you're pushing the heel of your hands into the floor and feeling the heel of the hands connecting to your armpits and the armpits connecting down the back body maybe. And then we're going to think about pulling. So we're going to dig those heel of the hands into the floor to pull the body weight forward. and unfurl the spine out into what we call table pose, where your spine is neutral. And now you're going to go right back into pushing. So there's a push. The hips reach back depending on how far you want to go. You don't have to go all the way, but you're pushing and you're letting your scapula, your shoulder blades lift, your armpits come up towards your ears, and then digging the heel of the hands into the floor, the belly button lifts, the shins press down, rolling forward to table, maybe rolling even further, right? Depending on how comfortable you are with body weight in your arms there. So pushing back and then pulling yourself forward. And again, this can become a really nice thing to do faster, letting there be a tempo change. So pushing back, pulling forward, pushing back, pulling forward, pushing back, pulling forward. Maybe taking that one more time, pushing back, pulling forward, and then pushing back. And this time, go ahead and let this become restorative. Another nice way to support your body here is to stack your fists and let your forehead rest on the stacked fists. That's going to be nice too. If you're wearing street clothes, you may have buttons on your pants. It may not feel quite so comfortable to come all the way into that deep hinge. So just taking a moment here and feeling all of the things. If this is a really uncomfortable position, you could work with gravity a little bit differently by coming over onto your back and drawing the knees towards the chest. And just taking a moment. Checking with the breath. And then maybe letting the 2 feet, if you've turned onto your back, great. If you need a moment to come and join me on your back, go ahead and roll over and letting the arms open wide. Taking a breath, feet on the floor, knees are bent. Maybe taking a couple of breaths. Just noticing sensation. We're going to do one last pulling activation here. Letting the right leg reach away, and I'm hovering the leg just above the floor. So there's a little bit of space. My heel's off the floor. There's lots of energy. And then I'm going to reach my left arm overhead. So my right leg out, my left arm overhead. And then we're going to pull the elbow of the left arm to the right knee. And they're going to come in over the abdomen. So we're pulling in and then punching them out or pushing them out or reaching, right? Reaching and pushing suddenly have a lot in common as well in this orientation, right? Reaching and pulling, pulling in. And if you can, imagine them pulling away from each other against resistance, right? So if you're lucky enough to have, I'm going to do this on the other side so I don't exhaust the first side. If you had a Theraband, or if you saw that this little video included a Theraband and you had one, you could come back to this at another time, right? So I'm going to switch sides, but suddenly I could add a pull. Oh, not unless I double knot it. Sorry. Tool failure. There we go. So you want to double knot so it doesn't do that. And then reaching the arm overhead, and they're coming in towards each other. And now the pulling is on the outward, right? Range of motion. So before we were thinking of pulling against, right? Which I guess you could do on like a Pilates machine where you had, like if you had tension, that you were pulling in from a spring that went away from your head or your seat, right? But in this instance, now we're getting the pulling here where we're pulling the arm and leg away. So you can also see we begin getting pulling in lots of different directions, and some of it's just about where the resistance is, where the load is, right? Similar gesture, different emphasis, right? So our push became a pull and our pull became a push. And maybe one more time, hopefully you've remembered to switch sides, reaching away, and then go ahead and remove your band. Opening the arms wide, I'm just going to walk my feet a little bit apart and let the knees gently fall to one side and let my gaze turn over the opposite shoulder. And now I'm yielding as much as I can. The bony rhythm of my legs, right? Feeling my feet, my shin bones, thigh bones coming into the hip bones, taking all of it to the middle and then changing sides, letting the head and neck roll away in the opposite direction. We're just gently walking out the legs, noticing the breath, body temperature, heartbeat, muscle tension, gravitational pull, feeling the floor coming up underneath to support you. One more time, one more change here. Feeling into yielding, right? Coming back to our original quality from the first session was yield to us, feeling into that weightedness, being in a body, letting the muscles relax around and away from the bones. Taking 2 more breaths here. You're welcome to close your eyes just to feel into that quality of weightedness, gravitational pull. When you're ready, you might gently roll to one side, give a little push with your top arm, bottom arm, coming up. Thank you for taking this time to be with me, to fill your cup, that you can fill the cup of others. I wish you a great afternoon, and maybe I'll see you next week.